So rook g3. It was being attacked, obviously, by the knight on g5. It's the positioning of white's pieces, the queen and the rook, seems to really be binding them down. I mean, if you look at the scope of so white has 3 pieces developed, and or 4 pieces. 2 of them haven't moved. The knight is clearly a good piece. It has a wide scope, a lot of squares it hits that are pretty key squares. The rook, on the other hand, if you look at its movement potential, it's not very, not very big. And the queen as well. The bishop, the white squared bishop, it's pretty blocked in the areas when it's meaningful. I mean, the f1 to a6 diagonal is a pretty good, it's a pretty long diagonal, but it really isn't doing a whole lot right now. You might want to consider moving it to f3, where he can, take advantage of the f3, h7 diagonal. That might be a lot more powerful. Oh, and then that bishop is definitely locked in. So, if I were white, he almost needs to figure out a way to reorganize his pieces. And I don't know what that's going to take if he has to play something like rook g2, queen g3, h4 to aid the pawn storm. Also potentially helpful is something like b3 combined with bishop d3 and bishop b2 or bishop a3 to improve the bishops, get them into the game a little more. So yeah, I think that white needs a reorganization plan. All right, so black goes ahead and plays e6. The trick here for black is he really, I mean, unless he's banking on his opponent making mistakes, he really has to not be passive. E6 could be helpful, though, to try to trade off the queen. But he might want to consider somewhere down the road a plan that involves something like rook c8 and threatening to, open up the game on the queen side. All right, queen f6. Looks like it's threatening queen to f2. Should be easily defensible by something like rook f3, or knight f3. I think I prefer rook f3 just because it transfers things to a more meaningful position. The knight's already pretty powerful where it is. Well, if he plays knight f3, it shouldn't be a problem. It supports g5. If I were black, I probably would have directly played queen g5 here, forcing the trade of queens because the queen has nowhere to go. So queen g6 is played. And the trade. Okay, well the trade looked like it was forced, but yeah, f5 is played here. So the pawn is pinned. There's this X-ray here, or this pin. So queen h5 is forced. Obviously, the other threat with this is that if you were to play just any move, let's say a3, obviously it's not a good move, but all of a sudden there's a fork there, and the rook can't move anywhere after rook g3. The knight takes, um, and then everything just basically falls. So, um, you know, queen h5 is basically forced here. But then, of course, queen g4 should be played, yeah. And once again, if queen takes queen, then there's a fork of the rook and the knight. So I prefer yeah, that seems like a very reasonable move. Bringing his rook to the g file. Here, it looks like black should just pick up a pawn with something like pawn. This pawn takes pawn and keep it simple. In this position um, with a two-pawn advantage and the connect, specifically them being connected center pawns, um, and still the more active pieces, this should be a really smooth sailing win for black. All right. All right. So back to the game. Preston exchanges. King. All right. There we were. So just knight back. He gets to open things up with tempo. Once again, this rook has never found a real home. I mean, look at all the rook moves that it's been involved in. Rook f3, rook h3, rook g3, rook h3. It's one, two, three, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The rook's moved 7 times in 28 moves, and it's back on a3, which is an awkward square, and still his scope is only moving really three, there's 4 spaces of freedom right now. It just doesn't, a quarter of his moves exactly have been rook moves, and the other rook hasn't moved yet. So, I mean, I can give Dan credit for having a good plan, or having a plan and sticking to it. Probably it's just need to be better prepared, perhaps. Wow. So bishop a6 was played check, and it looks like this is like a mate coming up. The only square to go to is f2. And then rook f8. All right. Maybe I should have stopped it sooner to let everyone get a crack at it. But all right. So we have a mate and 2 on the board. Go ahead and see if you can find it. All right. Mate and 2 that I found was bishop h4, double check. King g1, and then rook to f1. Well done.